You may be seated. So good afternoon. My name is Reverend Patty Bittner, and I have the privilege and honor of officiating this celebration of life for Silas today. And we are pleased to welcome you into this space where we keep love flowing and we invite hearts to open to the love in which we live and move and have our being. Firstly, I want to thank you for coming to surround Silas's family with your love and to celebrate a short life lived with great love and perseverance. Ethan will tell some of the story. Silas started with difficulties and discovered more challenges along the way. And your presence here provides support for this time of grieving. Love always makes a difference. Each person here makes a difference. Thank you for your love and the gift of coming to this sacred time of celebrating a child who stole all of our hearts. So today, emotions are going to be close to the surface. It's a vulnerable time. And we are here to do two things that do not seem to go together: to celebrate and to grieve. But only in the context of knowing or believing that love never dies is that possible. As I look out and see your faces, I see the world in which Silas lived. Faces that offered community and a chance for him to shine his precious light. I know I will see tears, they are welcome. And there will be expressions of love and tenderness as we remember specific moments spent in his presence. We know grief because when someone has been a part of your life and then they leave, we feel the loss. It's part of the cycle of love. When you must say goodbye because of death, it is painful. Yet that is not the end of the story. Today we recognize the embrace of God into which our loved ones return. So I want you to stop right now and in your mind, picture one of your favorite times with Silas when peace was on his face. And now imagine that expanded. We come from love and we return to love. We can imagine deep peace for the ones we love that go before us. So now I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath and become aware of the gift of life as we go into prayer. In Unity, we like to do a lot of breathing, so I'm going to invite you to breathe in and release. Just become fully present. Remember, in this moment, the light of love is within each of us. This light is ever calling us to know that we are connected, that we are one. This light lives in us in beautiful powers. Powers of wisdom, love, faith, strength, and imagination. We claim this time together today for a very sacred purpose, to dwell in the love that lives and breathes each of us, to enfold this family in a circle of love that says we care deeply about you and what you are experiencing. Know that you are not going through this alone. Know that you have everything you need to go through this time when things feel so out of kilter. So we create the space today for tears, for laughter, for tenderness. We're joyously celebrating the gracious, sweet gift we knew as Silas. We give thanks for this time, for all these people he loved, and for his love planted in the depths of our being and in grand memories. And so it is. I cannot even begin to think about Silas without thinking about the amazing love of Taylor and Ethan, who welcomed him. I remember the Sundays before he was born when they were here, glowing with joy and anticipation. And that unconditional love never ceased. In over 30 years of ministry, I have never had a family have so many complications arise from a difficult birth. Their focus was on what did he need. Taylor began learning Braille, and they started talking about moving to a town that would offer the best education. Silas was loved for exactly who he was. I'm sure he felt that love, and I suspect that is why he was able to stay with us for a little over a year. As we celebrate Silas today, I want us to honor the strength and resilience and love of these two parents who showed us all what unconditional love looks like when the rubber meets the road. Tears came when I found out that the birth had difficulties and that he was in NICU. I remember touching Silas in his incubator and thinking, this tiny little one is tough. He is a fighter. He is going to let his love light shine, which is exactly what he did. I remember holding him for the first time. What a sweet love bug. I remember having him in our church service here for a spaghetti dinner. I watched Taylor and Ethan at home being the proud mom and dad. I loved hearing that he was enjoying his music and choosing particular pieces on his toy that played songs. Taylor said we're discovering his personality. We learned of seizures and more difficulties. And now we are here together because this beautiful child is no longer physically present. And I do not have answers for why an innocent little child would have such an experience. But this is what I do know. When I have experienced loss in my life, it is the support and connections with others that made a big difference. I've said before, it's my belief that we come from love and we return to love. I believe that each of us is a part of this love and that we are never without resources. That thought gives me strength and I hope it gives you some too. I invite each of you to find what it is that gives you strength and return to it again and again, because we're really just starting the path of grief. So now I'm going to invite Mom and Dad up. I think Dad's up first to share. We have a mic right there for you. Okay.
Test. I'm new to this. The story I'm about to tell is that of the strongest boy we've ever known, Silas Dale Bloomfield, as well as myself and my wife, Taylor Bloomfield. We arrived at St. Francis Medical Center on January 18th at 9 p.m., excited to meet our baby boy and nervous about the induction process and delivery ahead. In the late hours of January 19th, 2024, Silas Dale Bloomfield was born via emergency C-section, unresponsive, and was resuscitated. He was immediately transferred to St. Mary's Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, where he underwent hypothermic therapy to prevent further damage to his brain. As Mom and Dad 209, we laid awake through the night, hoping to hear news on the state of Silas, who came into this world fighting a difficult battle from the very start. Taylor was in recovery and could not be transferred alongside him. We took the journey to St. Mary's very early the next morning. Seeing Silas for the first time was surreal. He was so beautiful, so little. We waited with him there the entire day, every day. We read to him and held his little arms and legs. Silas, shortly after the end of the therapeutic cooling, finally moved, and we were so overjoyed we could have sung if not for all the silence around us. Taylor and I both cried happy tears. Not long after he opened his eyes for the first time, despite being given an incredibly low chance of surviving his first few days, he had overcome his first insurmountable challenge. At around a week old, we were given a diagnosis: hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, or HIE, a type of neurological damage resulting from loss of oxygen circulation during birth. The main words I remember were damage to the basal ganglia, as well as several other parts of his brain. My wife and I were shaken to our core with the news, but prepared to fight for him. We agreed that disability is not a tragedy, it's just another way of living, that his quality of life would be what drives us forward. In the following weeks, as his brain activity increased, he gained more and more function, proving with every step of the way that he was ready to fight. He tormented his nurses by thwarting any attempts to swaddle him or secure his arms in any way to keep him from ripping out his NG tube or wires. He opened his eyes more and more often in these weeks, and any time he's been awake, he spent looking out at the world beyond his hospital crib. He slept often as well, but whether or not he was awake or asleep, we stayed as near to him as possible, constantly taking time to hold him, read to him, and exchange with him gifts in the form of quilted hearts designed to hold his scent for our sake and our scent for his. Silas was indomitable. Soon, he was moved from the NICU to the pediatric intensive care unit. It was here that he continued to develop neurologically, and he began to move toward making certain milestones on time. He was still incapable of swallowing and coughing, so he underwent surgery to have a G-tube implanted. This was not a barrier for him. His ability to suckle grew stronger every day. We were hopeful that he would eventually learn to take a pacifier and eat orally. At around 4 weeks old, Silas began lifting up his head and even balancing on his elbows. He also began vocalizing occasionally, letting us know that he was healing. Near the end of 5 weeks, he was ready to go home. Taylor finally got to dress him in his going home outfit she had picked while pregnant, a little gray and white knit outfit with an elephant on the front. In the next month and a half, he hit several important milestones, including army crawling, starting to grasp objects, and even a bit of reaching. He held his head up for longer and longer, and even rolled from front to back a few times. For a while, we thought he might be deaf. He had failed 3 hearing tests, and was not responding to noises. And then one day, at around 8 weeks, Taylor dropped his medication syringes on the floor, and he startled. Suddenly, he began to react to sounds consistently, turning to our voices, soothing music, and to us reading to him. Then, through a combination of various therapies, appointments, and daily interactions, it was discovered that he had CVI, or cortical vision impairment, which prevented him from seeing certain colors, fine details, and shapes. Despite this, his eyesight had developed, and he spent most of the time he took exploring with his eyes to look at lamps, sunlight filtering through windows and treetops, and, as a result of our discovery that he could see blue, and presumably the colors surrounding it on the spectrum, Taylor painted the window by his rocking chair so that rainbow light would come through. We began to learn to read and write in Braille. Though folks with CVI can sometimes learn to read text, Braille is considered more reliable. We focused on exploring textures and reading Braille books with him, guiding him by the elbow to find the words. Sometimes he would pat the page, acknowledging and exploring what was there. The Department for the Blind and Visually Impaired provided us with some toys geared toward children like Silas. We also found some ourselves. One of the first toys we noticed him taking a particular interest in was a little elephant with a glowing belly that lit up and played music. Taylor and I started planning a life headed for Stanton so that he could attend the school for the blind and still receive the quality education he deserved. During this time, Silas was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, but knowing that he would still experience love and joy, we were reassured that everything would be fine, and that this journey would continue to be a beautiful one. When he was around 4 months old, he began having spasms that looked similar to his cerebral palsy movements, but did not respond to soothing, and they came in several minute-long clusters. Upon going to the neurologist, Silas was diagnosed with infantile epileptic spasms, which are not uncommon in the HIE community. Silas experienced a major regression in his milestones. First, he stopped lifting his head and trying to crawl. Then, he no longer used his arms. Later, he stopped suckling, and eventually, he no longer turned to lights or sounds. He began to need a suction canister, used to remove saliva that he could not swallow or cough out, which is being produced much more frequently. He continued being read to, sang to, and cuddled constantly. The seizures were very difficult to control, and it seemed as if his medications were doing nothing. We started seeing other movements that looked abnormal, but we were told that they were related to his cerebral palsy. Even with his deteriorating condition, Silas still never lost his fighting spirit. Amongst the waves, he would occasionally display skills he had gone months without. He briefly learned to press a button to control a fan or music player, and he still very much enjoyed his music. We started sorting out an out-of-country trip for specialized stem cell therapy that could potentially brighten his prognosis. But in order to apply, Silas had to be 15 months old. In October, we decided to switch Silas's care from Bon Secours to the Children's Hospital. We had heard amazing things about Dr. Kimbrough and the complex care clinic, and wanted Silas's care to be centralized. The first visit, Tay recounted the last 9 months. Dr. Kimbrough listened empathetically and consulted with Dr. Way, an epileptologist at the CHOR. Later that afternoon, we received a call, whereupon they told us to go to the emergency room ASAP. They could not wait a day. We were startled, as what we had been seeing with Silas had become normal for us. At the hospital, an EEG was taken, and the results detailed his new diagnosis, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, a highly problematic, progressive, and particularly intense seizure disorder, especially considering Silas's pre-existing conditions and age. We were told that he was not having minor seizure activity as we had suspected. Instead, we were informed that his seizures were nearly constant, and that much of the previously assumed cerebral palsy activity was related to seizures. Silas also happened to have another decline during this visit, and was shortly thereafter placed on at-home oxygen. Silas started palliative care with Noah's Children, a long-term care program for terminally ill patients, and his activity became much more closely monitored by doctors. Adaptations at this time included the reduction in therapy, the addition of new care tools, and the removal of others, and an increase to his baseline oxygen intake as needed. He slept much more frequently than before, needing more rest due to fluctuations in seizure activity and stress on his body due to hopeful steroid therapy. New diagnoses were made in subsequent hospital visits. Despite the additional difficulties, Silas did not stop smiling. His first birthday was celebrated heartily on January 19th, 2025, with friends and family, and he received numerous well wishes. In the last week of January, we noticed Silas having increased work of breathing, but not displaying any signs of illness. As the week went on, it became more and more difficult to keep him comfortable. On Friday, January 31st, 2025, he woke with an incredibly high heart rate and had difficulty keeping his airway open. From Friday to Sunday, while he was briefly awake, these episodes continued, and the rest of his time was spent resting and recovering. He continued to become weaker. His breathing was fast and shallow with apneic episodes. He was on the maximum amount of oxygen we could give him at home, and he was still struggling. In a meeting with his palliative care team on that Sunday, the 2nd of February, we agreed that we were seeing the transition to his end-of-life period. Just a few weeks ago, he had been frequently smiling and cooing. He never stopped smiling. On Monday morning, February 3rd, 2025, after a long night and weekend of proving once again just how strong he was, Silas passed away peacefully between my wife and myself on the couch we had spent so many loving hours together on. It was not chronicled in this speech, but he defied the odds and saw miracles literally dozens, if not hundreds of times. He leaves behind an untouchable legacy that has left my wife and I stronger than we could have ever imagined, as well as heartbroken that our time here with him in physicality is over. He touched more lives than could be counted on the fingers of all the hands in this room, and has to his credit that he passed as he was born, pure as a flake of falling snow in the Arctic, and loved by all. If any lesson should be taken from his short time here on earth with us, it is that with the proper amount of determination, any impossible task comes within reach, and any glass ceiling may be broken. Thank you.
One of the things that I enjoyed doing with Silas most was reading. I loved reading to him and sometimes moving his hands so that he could feel the braille on the page. So when we learned what was happening with Silas back in November, the first thing I did was try to find books to explain to him what was happening and what life would be like from then. So I looked around and I found this book. It's called Everywhere Still, and it explores the nature of grief from the eyes of a child. And while I was never able to order this book in time, we did listen to it. I thought it was very beautiful. So I'd love to read it for you guys. I miss you and I love you. I know I always will. And even though you aren't here now, I think of you all the time still. I still have all of our memories. They live right here inside me. Sometimes they hurt my heart to hold. Sometimes they're warm, sometimes they're cold. Sometimes they feel so bright and huge I smile because they feel like you. And sometimes I try to wish you back, and then I wish it worked like that. The truth is, I'd give everything to have you here right next to me, to see your face or hold your hand or hear my laugh with yours again. Sometimes the missing gets so big, it seems to swallow everything. It feels like there's a hole in me. That hole is where you used to be. I still have all this love for you, but you aren't here to give it to. But then I think, what if love knows exactly where it needs to go? What if it traveled fast and far to find you now, right where you are? My love becomes a bird of light. Go now, I say, and it takes flight. It wings across all time and space. It knows exactly who to find. How do I know it flies to you? I know because you send yours too. It travels very fast and far and comes to rest here in my heart. And when your love comes here to me, I recognize it instantly. It fills my heart and warms it too. It feels like I'm right next to you. I miss you and I love you. I know I always will. And even though you aren't here right now, I feel you everywhere still. And that's when I remember that as far as you might be, it's love that keeps you close to me close to you, and keeps you close to me. And all right. Thank you all.
So now we're going to invite anyone who would like to come up, encourage family members first, come up and share a story or what they're thinking and feeling, and let us support you.
Hello, friends and family. Okay. Oh. Hello, friends and family. Thank you for being here today to honor the life of Silas Dale. Silas was a ray of light, a pure and innocent soul who touched our hearts in ways words can scarcely describe. Though brief, the time spent with Si was filled with profound joy, wonder, and love. He is missed tremendously. I want to express my gratitude and raise awareness for Silas's care team, especially Noah's children and Hope for HIE. Noah's children has been instrumental in helping us navigate this journey. They provide emotional support, education, and coping mechanisms. Noah's Children is Central Virginia's only pediatric palliative care program dedicated to holistic, compassionate care for children with life-limiting and life-threatening conditions. Their interdisciplinary team includes physicians, nurses, social workers, spiritual caregivers, and volunteers working together to create a comprehensive care plan. Noah's Children's profound commitment to providing compassionate care is a fitting parallel as we remember Silas, who embodied a spirit that reminds us of the beauty and fragility of life. Hope for HIE connects families worldwide through a support network. providing tools, resources, and connections to face the unexpected. Their mission is focused on improving the quality of life for children and families impacted by HIE. HIE has a spectrum of outcomes that impacts children in various ways throughout their lifetime. As we reflect on Silas's life, we remember the special moments, laughter, curiosity, trust, and boundless energy he brought into our lives. Though our hearts are heavy with sorrow, we are filled with gratitude for having had the privilege of knowing and loving him. Please honor Silas by embracing the lessons of Noah's children and hope for HIE. Lessons of hope, renewal, and the enduring power of love. Love and kindness are never wasted and always make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to share?
Hi, I'm Michelle Bartz, and I am Taylor's aunt, Jennifer's sister. And I shared with them how much Silas changed me. Because I think when you're going through grief, you only have two choices. And it's either to move closer to God or to move away from him. And he brought me closer to God. I'm a pediatric speech language pathologist, and I've spent 22 years working for Children's Hospital. And all the things that Ethan explained to you about Silas, I knew. And on the one hand, you would think that would be great, that I could help them navigate. Maybe. But when the calls came in about Silas, I just started polishing that therapist lens. I saw him. And when I held him, especially in the beginning, I was assessing and judging and despairing. I have a real good poker face because you can't do what I do and not. And I prayed with you guys, and I prayed over Silas. And I had my prayer warriors. I was texting them. They were asking me how things were going. But inside, I was so afraid. I was wailing. I was raging. I was so angry that this happened to my family. I wrestled with God over this for a long time. Why this perfect baby would suffer. Why these beautiful kids would suffer. Why you were in this place that I knew and I judged to not be good. And all the while I was raging, I was stunned. And quite frankly, completely dismissive of your hope, of your optimism, of your gratitude that Silas had been saved. I didn't understand it. And I rationalized it away because you're so young. You're baby. Look at you. And, you'll always be 10 to me. And I just thought, they don't know what I know. They don't know what I understand. And I felt it was completely in my scope to assess the situation. So I was working with an 11-year-old boy when I got a text on my watch that said Silas had been diagnosed. He was deaf. And as much as I wanted to maintain my composure, I could not. And that 11-year-old boy became very concerned and asked me, "Miss Bartz, what's wrong?" And actually what he said sounded more like, "Miss Bartz, what's wrong?" And in a place of complete vulnerability, I shared with him that my niece's baby was in the hospital, and we had just found out that he was deaf, and I was very, very sad. And that boy did not miss a beat. He just exclaimed, "Well, that means he's going to have supervision and super smell, because that's what happens. The other senses take over, and it just makes up for the one that was lost." And I couldn't help but just laugh. His enthusiasm was so beautiful, and it brought me so much comfort. And I shared that story with you, and it brought all of us a lot of comfort. Whispers from heaven come to us in all sorts of packages. So you guys know that diagnosis was wrong. Silas was not deaf. Silas could hear, and his enjoyment of music brought us a lot of joy. And that was when that tiny little light of new understanding began to pierce all my knowledge, all my arrogance, everything I thought I knew. So I have been a regular church attender for decades. Weekly Bible study and prayer groups for what? So that in this moment, my response to Silas's injury can be fear and wailing and despair. It's been my response to many things over the decades. But right now, God finally had my attention. And in my quiet time and in my prayer, I heard his voice. "Michelle, you know nothing. Michelle, you understand nothing of my kingdom. Michelle, your assessment is arrogant and foolish. Who are you to judge what has been created as good or not good? Who are you to think you know better than the creator of the universe?" And the verse came to me, "Unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 18:3. All these decades of regular church attendance, I never grasped, what does it look like to become like a little child? And what does it sound like to be a little child? It sounds like trust. It sounds like rejoicing. And it sounds like leaning into that place of not understanding. It sounds like Taylor and Ethan through this whole process. God finally got through to me through Silas and through Taylor and Ethan and through an 11-year-old boy that could not say his R sounds. Romans 5:5 says, this hope will not lead to disappointment. My God did not fail. In December, I went to visit Taylor and Ethan knowing that Silas's diagnosis was terminal. And I went expecting to see fear, expecting to see wailing, and expecting despair. And what I was met with was quiet and peace and such beauty. This overwhelming sense of pure love and surrender. Silas was asleep on his mother's chest. His father's hand was on his back. There was no despair, no fear, just love. And I still couldn't grasp it. And I asked so many questions, and Taylor answered all of them. I won't share her testimony. I'll just share mine. My anger does nothing. One day, I will lay like Silas, perfectly loved in the arms of the creator of the universe, and I will never cry again like Silas. And when I open my eyes in heaven, I will see Silas shining and whole, and he will say to me, Aunt Shell, come see all the goodness that has come through me. And then I will know, and only then will I understand God's kingdom. And only then will I judge righteously that it has all been worked for good. Your son has brought so much glory to God. He has matured me, and I will never be the same. And the ripple effects of his life will continue to move outward and bless others. Thank you so much for the gift of your son, the gift of your faith, and the gift of your testimony.
Thank you. Who else would like to share?
Hello there, everyone. I wish I had had the foresight to know, to have written something down beforehand, but despite that, I figured it would be the right thing to come up here and at least say a little bit of something. Over the last year and some weeks, I've gotten to know Silas and the love that he had shared. It was an honor, courtesy of Ethan and Taylor, to be able to be involved in his life and to be considered a close friend. And in Tay's own words, to even be considered Uncle Chris. But despite such a short time being with him and to have experienced his presence, I can comfortably say that I loved him as much as I do my own family. Even with the challenges that have already passed, and with the potential challenges that might come up in the near future, I just want you two to know, Ethan and Taylor Bloomfield, that I will be there as much as I can to help you through them. That's about as far as I got with this little speech, but yeah. But despite everything that has happened, I just want you two to know that if you need anything, I'm always be a phone call away.
You.
Hello, I'm Lainey. I'm Tay and Ethan's friend. I don't have anything written down. I get really nervous with public speaking, but I wanted to share the memory of when I met Silas. I remember we were helping Ethan and Tay move, and I had rode with Tay to the hospital where he was at. And I remember they were talking about how big he was. And he was 8 pounds, I forget how many ounces, and he had a really big head. But when I walked in, I expected a big baby, but I forgot how tiny newborns are. And we walked over to him, and he was so tiny. And he looked so much like Tay. It was so odd because even though I knew there were things that had happened and complications, there didn't look like there was anything wrong with him. And he was so beautiful. It,
Anyone else? So I have a poem to share, attributed to Henry Van Dyke, called Gone from My Sight. I am standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There she is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight, that is all. She is just as large in mast, hull, and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just as that moment when someone says, "There, she is gone," there are other eyes watching her coming and other voices ready to take up the glad shout. Here she comes. And that is dying. So my heart is full. We have borne witness to the power of a life connected to the one in whose image we are created. Silas was one of a kind, a unique expression of divine love touching each life, and like a beautiful flower, dropping seeds that will continue to grow from within our hearts, seeds of love that can never be taken away and that will be shared, because love is always expansive. Friends and beloved family members, Silas's physical form has passed, but the energy that was his will continue to make this world a place where love matters through each one of us. Let us proudly bear the love shared by Silas and keep that energy flowing. Every time we reach out in love to another, we shine a part of this magnificent circle of life of which Silas was a part. Call to mind a favorite memory and let the love of that moment fill your heart. Call to mind a time of joy and let it bring a smile. Just look at this, a large photograph on the frame up here. How can you look at that and not smile at the beauty of that child? He is still very much here where he has always been, in our hearts. So I'm going to invite you to participate in a way to honor Silas that you may not have been exposed to at another celebration of life, but it's something we love to do here. And we give our beloved one a standing ovation. So we stand up and we clap and we scream and we woohoo and we do anything that feels appropriate to celebrate the joy and wonder of this life that was given to us. So we'll do it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Woo-hoo! Woo! going to invite you all to continue standing as our friends from Blyleys come up and help us move toward processing out. Absolutely. Want to come up to a mic so everyone can hear?
This is the last time, I promise. So, many, many times for several years, something has happened to me, or I have done something, and I look back on it in the future, and I ask myself what I learned or what I taught. I tried to do that with anything significant. And when I learned that we were having a baby, one of the things I was most excited for was to teach. I wanted to teach Silas about everything. I know Tay did too. And, I really, really struggled with that for the entire duration of his life because it was very difficult to effectively communicate directly to him. And I wondered and wondered for months and months. And finally, the day of his passing, I sat back and I realized that I was the student. I was never meant to teach him. He was meant to teach me. And that's all.
Perfectly said, Ethan.